Some buildings just feel wrong. You walk past them and get a chill, you look up at the windows and feel like something is looking back. The Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles is one of those buildings. It's a place with a reputation. A place soaked in stories of death, violence, and mystery. People talk about it having a dark energy. But is that real? Is a building just bricks and mortar, or can it hold on to the pain that happens inside its walls? To understand the Cecil, you have to go back to the beginning. It opened its doors in 1924. It was a beautiful place then. Marble lobby, stained glass, palm trees. It was built for business travelers and tourists, a place to stay in the heart of a booming city. The builders had a grand vision. They saw a bright future. They had no idea what was coming. And then the Great Depression hit. The world's economy collapsed. The hotel's fortunes collapsed with it. The wealthy guests stopped coming. The tourists vanished. The grand lobby felt empty. The Cecil had to adapt to survive. So it did what many buildings in the area did. It became cheap, it became a budget hotel, and then it became something more. It became a residential hotel, a place for people with nowhere else to go. Its rooms, once meant for a comfortable night's sleep, became homes for the transient, the poor, the desperate. This is where the story begins to turn. The hotel's location didn't help. It sits right on the edge of what would become known as Skid Row, an area synonymous with poverty, addiction, and mental illness. The Cecil became a reflection of its surroundings. The hope and glamour of the 1920s were gone, replaced by the grim reality of the 1930s. And with that reality came death. The first documented suicide at the Cecil happened in 1931. A man named W.K. Norton checked in under a different name. A week later, he was found in his room. Though he had taken poison capsules, he was just the first. Over the next decade, the list grew. There was Benjamin Dodich, found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound in 1932. There was a former Army medical sergeant, Louis D. Borden, who slashed his own throat with a razor in 1934. Grace E. Magro fell from a ninth-story window in 1937. The telephone wires broke her fall, but she died later in the hospital. In 1938, a Marine named Roy Thompson jumped from the roof and was found on a nearby building. You could say this was just a sign of the times. The Depression was a period of immense suffering. People were losing everything. Suicides were tragically common. The Cecil, being a cheap and anonymous place, was simply a convenient location for people at the end of their rope. That's the logical explanation. But the sheer number of them, one after another, started to build a pattern. It was as if the building itself was developing a reputation, not just with the living, but with the dead. The darkness wasn't just about self-inflicted harm, though. It was about violence, too. In 1944, a woman named Dorothy Jean Purcell woke up in her room with stomach pains. She was staying at the hotel with a man, but she didn't know she was pregnant. She went to the bathroom and gave birth to a baby boy. She thought the baby was dead. In a state of panic and confusion, she threw the newborn out the window. She was later arrested, and doctors found she was mentally unstable. The baby died. The event added a new horrific layer to the hotel's story. It wasn't just a place people went to die. It was a place where innocence was lost in the most brutal way imaginable, but the most infamous crime of that era was the murder of Pigeon Goldie Osgood in 1964. Goldie was a retired telephone operator. She was a well-known long-term resident of the Cecil. She got her nickname because she loved feeding the pigeons in nearby Pershing Square. She was a fixture in the community, a seemingly harmless old woman. One day, she was found dead in her room. She had been brutally assaulted, stabbed, and strangled. The room was ransacked. The crime was shocking, and it was never solved. The police had a suspect, a man seen walking with her near the square, but he was later cleared. The killer was never found. The murder of Pigeon Goldie changed the perception of the Cecil again. Now, it wasn't just a place of suicide and desperation. It was a place where you could be a victim. A place where evil could walk the halls, commit a terrible act, and just disappear. The hotel's labyrinthine layout and its transient population made it a perfect place to get away with something. The residents were often invisible people, the kind society forgets. Their lives were cheap, and their deaths were often just another statistic. Goldie's murder was different because she was known, but the outcome was the same. No justice. Just another ghost story for the Cecil. The hotel's reputation continued to curdle through the 60s and 70s. It was no longer just a cheap hotel, it was becoming part of the underbelly of Los Angeles. Skid Row was growing, and the Cecil was at its heart. The hotel became a hub for drug dealers, sex workers, and people running from the law. It was a place with no questions asked. You could pay for your room in cash, use a fake name, and no one would bother you. The anonymity that once appealed to desperate souls now appealed to predators. And that's how the Night Stalker came to the Cecil. In the mid-1980s, Los Angeles was gripped by fear. A serial killer was on the loose. He was breaking into homes, assaulting and murdering men, women, and children. He was a Satanist who left pentagrams at his crime scenes. He was a monster who seemed to strike at random. His name was Richard Ramirez, and for several months during his killing spree, he lived at the Cecil Hotel. He would rent a room on the top floor for a few dollars a night. After committing his horrific crimes, he would dump his bloody clothes in the hotel's dumpster out back and walk up to his room, sometimes covered in blood himself. No one noticed, or if they did, no one cared. The residents of the Cecil were used to seeing strange and disturbing things. Ramirez, with his wild eyes and gaunt frame, just blended in. The hotel's own darkness provided him with the perfect camouflage. He later said he loved the Cecil because of the lowlifes and weirdos. He fit right in. Think about that for a moment. A notorious serial killer was living among hundreds of other people. He was sleeping in a room, walking the same hallways, riding the same elevators as families and other long-term residents. The very air in the place was shared with a monster. This isn't a ghost story. This is a documented fact. The Cecil wasn't just a stage for tragedy, it became a shelter for evil. The idea of a dark energy starts to feel less like a metaphor and more like a literal description. As if one serial killer wasn't enough, another one checked into the Cecil a few years later. An Austrian journalist named Jack Unterweger. He was in Los Angeles to write about crime. It was a strange assignment because Unterweger was a convicted murderer himself. He had been released from prison in Austria, hailed as an example of rehabilitation. He was a writer, a celebrity. But he hadn't changed. While staying at the Cecil, he murdered at least 3 sex workers. He chose the Cecil specifically because of its connection to Richard Ramirez. He was drawn to the darkness. He wanted to be a part of its story. The hotel was becoming a pilgrimage site for killers. It was a magnet. So you have decades of suicides, you have unsolved murders, you have 2 of the most infamous serial killers in recent history using the hotel as their base of operations. The weight of all this history is immense. You can feel it just by looking at the building. The bricks seem to have absorbed the pain, the fear, the despair. The stories become part of the structure itself. And then came the story that introduced the Cecil to a new generation. The story that made it a global phenomenon on the internet. The story of Elisa Lam. In 2013, Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student, was traveling alone up the West Coast. She checked into the Cecil Hotel, she was active on social media, documenting her trips, she spoke to her parents every day. And then, one day, she stopped. She vanished. The Los Angeles Police Department launched a missing person investigation. They searched her room and the hotel, but found nothing. After a couple of weeks with no leads, they released a piece of evidence that would turn the case into a viral sensation. It was a video. Elevator surveillance footage taken the day she disappeared. The video is about 4 minutes long, and it is deeply unsettling. Elisa gets into the elevator and presses several buttons. The doors don't close. She peeks out into the hallway, looking left and right, as if she's hiding from someone. Then she jumps back into the elevator, pressing herself into the corner. The doors still don't close. She steps out again, then back in. She starts making strange, contorted gestures with her hands, as if she's talking to someone who isn't there. She looks distressed, confused, maybe playful. It's impossible to tell. Finally, she walks out of the elevator and off to the left. The elevator doors then close, open, close again, and the elevator finally moves. It's the last time anyone ever saw her. The video exploded online. Millions of people watched it. Amateur detectives and conspiracy theorists dissected every frame. What was going on? Was she on drugs? Was she having a psychotic episode? Was she playing a game with someone just out of the camera's view? The fact that the elevator doors didn't close while she was inside was particularly strange. It felt like something out of a horror movie. The mystery of her disappearance deepened. Meanwhile, back at the Cecil, guests started to complain. The water pressure was low. The water itself was discolored and had a strange taste. Some said it was black. Maintenance workers went to the roof to check the hotel's 4 large water tanks. They opened the lid of one of them, and they found her. Elisa Lam's naked body was floating in the water tank. Her clothes were in the tank with her. The lid to the tank was heavy and difficult to open. The roof was protected by a locked alarm door. How did she get up there? How did she get into the tank, and how did she close the heavy lid from the inside? The official coroner's report ruled her death an accidental drowning. It also listed her bipolar disorder as a significant contributing factor. The theory is that she was having a manic episode. In her confused state, she managed to get to the roof, perhaps through a fire escape. She climbed into the water tank, possibly to hide from a real or imagined threat. She took off her clothes to be less weighed down. Trapped inside, she drowned. The water level was high enough that she couldn't get out, and the lid may have fallen shut after she got in. This is the rational explanation, but for many people it just doesn't add up. The questions linger. How did she get past the locked and alarmed door to the roof without setting anything off? How did a small woman manage to open the heavy tank lid by herself? Why was she naked? And what about that bizarre elevator video? Her behavior seemed to suggest she was interacting with someone, or something that we can't see. This is where the idea of the Cecil's dark energy comes rushing back in. For those who believe in the paranormal, the Elisa Lam case is proof. They say she was being tormented by one of the hotel's many ghosts. Some point to a strange Korean horror movie from 2005 called Dark Water, which has an almost identical plot. A young woman dies in a rooftop water tank, and her ghost haunts the apartment building through the water system. The parallels are eerie. Others point to the so-called elevator game, a supposed ritual that can transport you to another dimension. The steps of the ritual involve pressing elevator buttons in a specific sequence, similar to what Elisa appeared to be doing. Was she playing a game that went horribly wrong? And then there's the simple, chilling possibility that the hotel itself, this place saturated with so much death, finally consumed another victim. That the dark energy is a real malevolent force that preys on the vulnerable. Elisa Lam, traveling alone and struggling with her mental health, would have been the perfect target. In the context of the Cecil's history, the supernatural explanation almost feels more plausible than the official one. But there's another way to look at the dark energy of the Cecil. It might not be supernatural at all. It might be something much more real, and perhaps even sadder. The Cecil Hotel for most of its life has been a warehouse for human misery. It's located in Skid Row, a place that is the end of the line for thousands of people. For decades, the hotel operated as an SRO, or single-room occupancy hotel. It provided cheap, minimal housing for people who couldn't afford a real apartment. The residents were the elderly poor, people with severe mental illnesses, drug addicts, and those just trying to survive day to day. The hotel was a reflection of a society that doesn't know what to do with its most vulnerable people. It put them all in one place, packed them into small rooms in a decaying building, and largely forgot about them. When you concentrate that much poverty, desperation, and untreated mental illness in one place, tragedy is not a possibility. It's an inevitability. From this perspective, the suicides weren't caused by a ghost. They were caused by despair. The violence wasn't caused by a curse. It was caused by the friction of damaged people living on top of each other. Richard Ramirez wasn't drawn there by a dark force. He was drawn there because it was anonymous and no one cared enough to notice a monster in their midst. And Elisa Lam. Perhaps the hotel didn't kill her with a ghost. Perhaps it killed her with neglect. She was a guest at what was, at the time, a hybrid hotel. Part of it was rebranded as a trendy hostel called Stay on Main, trying to attract young tourists like Elisa. The other part was still the old Cecil, housing long-term, low-income residents. The two worlds collided within the same walls. Security was lax. Doors that should have been locked weren't. A vulnerable young woman in the middle of a mental health crisis was able to access a dangerous part of the building. Her death was a tragic accident, but it was an accident that was waiting to happen in a place like the Cecil. The dark energy might just be the name we give to profound, systemic human failure. In recent years, the hotel has been closed. It was bought by developers with a plan to turn it into a boutique hotel and affordable housing units. A massive renovation was underway. They want to scrub the building clean, not just physically, but psychically. They want to erase the past. But can you do that? Can a new coat of paint and a new name cover up the stories of Pigeon Goldie, Richard Ramirez, and Elisa Lam? The legend is too strong now. It's been the subject of documentaries, podcasts, and countless YouTube videos. The hotel is a character in its own right. It's the Bates Motel, the Overlook Hotel. But it's real. The stories are real. The deaths are real. So, does the Cecil Hotel have a dark energy? The answer depends on what you believe. If you believe that places can hold onto the emotions and events that happen within them, then the Cecil is arguably one of the most negatively charged places on the planet. The sheer volume of suffering it has witnessed is staggering. The suicides, the murders, the overdoses, the lonely deaths from old age in a forgotten room. That much pain has to leave a stain. A psychic residue that can be felt by people who are sensitive to it. In this view, the hotel is a malevolent entity, a black hole that draws in misery and amplifies it. The energy is a palpable thing, a presence in the empty hallways and silent rooms. But if you look at it through a more rational lens, the dark energy is a metaphor. It's the story of a city and a country that has failed its most vulnerable citizens. The Cecil is a monument to that failure. The darkness isn't in the walls, it's in the circumstances that brought people to those walls. The hotel is a microcosm of urban decay. Its history is a direct result of poverty, a broken mental health care system, and societal indifference. The horror of the Cecil isn't supernatural, it's the horror of what people will do to each other and to themselves when they are left with no hope. Maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Maybe the decades of real human suffering created an atmosphere so heavy, so oppressive, that it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. People expected bad things to happen at the Cecil, so they did. The hotel's reputation attracted people who were already on the edge, people like Ramirez and Unterweger, who were drawn to its sordid history. The building became a focal point for darkness, both real and imagined. Ultimately, we can't know for sure. There are no instruments that can measure dark energy. There's no scientific proof that a building can be evil. But there are stories, and the stories of the Cecil Hotel are powerful. They speak to a deep-seated fear that some places are just wrong. That evil is a real thing, and it can settle in a place like Mold. Whether you believe the Cecil is haunted by ghosts or by the memory of human suffering, the effect is the same. It's a place that makes you look over your shoulder. It's a place that reminds us of the darkness that exists, not just in old, decaying buildings, but in the world around us. The hotel is a silent witness, and if its walls could talk, they would scream. The dark energy of the Cecil Hotel might be a myth, or it might be the collected echo of every scream its walls have ever absorbed. And that's a sound that never really fades.